Welcome to the JMC True Crime Channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Today's story is one that delves into the thin line between love and hate. When you love someone, it means you care, and when you hate someone, it means you care. Now, what happens when the line blurs and indifference is all that's left? Strap in and let's get stuck in. On the 4th of May 1975, a beautiful baby girl was born to Sharon and Dennis Rocha. Dennis was a dairy operator, and the two of them owned a dairy farm west of Escalon in California. They had a son 4 years prior, so this new baby girl was their second child. They would go on to name their baby girl after a kind girl that Sharon had met in high school. They would name their daughter Laci Denise Rocha. From a very young age, Laci would begin to work on the farm, and she enjoyed gardening with her mother. It was something for them to bond over, and bond they did. Laci's love for plant life would continue over into her adult years. Sharon and Dennis divorced when Laci and her older brother Brent were very young. Sharon and the two kids moved to Modesto, California, but the kids would still visit the dairy farm on the weekends. Sharon would eventually remarry Ron Grantsky, who would become Laci and Brent's stepfather from the time that Laci was only 2 years old. Ron helped out a lot with the kids and formed very close bonds with them. He became more than just their mother's husband, he became another father figure to them. In high school, Laci was a cheerleader, and after graduating from Thomas Downey High School, she attended California Polytechnic State University, also known as Cal Poly. She majored in ornamental horticulture, and as I mentioned before, in her childhood, she and her mother would enjoy gardening together, and this is something that bled into her adulthood. While studying at Cal Poly, Laci would occasionally visit her friend who worked in a restaurant called the Pacific Cafe, and it was there that she met her friend's co-worker called Scott Peterson. This was in the middle of 1994, so Laci was only 19 at the time. Laci had an immediate interest in Scott and made the first move by giving him her phone number, and then when she went home, she told her mum that she met the man that she would marry. Laci was correct. That's exactly what would happen. But we will get to that in due course. Their very first date was to go deep sea fishing, but Laci got seasick. Their relationship progressed quite quickly and grew very serious. Scott even decided to put aside his dreams of becoming a professional golfer to focus on business. The couple would date for about 2 years and then they found a place and moved in together to officially start their new life together. It is highly speculated that Scott cheated on Laci several times during this period. However, this is alleged as I don't have any details to corroborate it, but I thought it was worth mentioning. After Laci graduated Cal Poly, the couple married in San Luis Obispo County's Avila Valley on the 9th of August 1997. So Laci was 22 at this time, and Scott was 3 years older, so he was 25. They were both quite young. And don't forget, Laci had told her mother shortly after first meeting Scott that she would marry him, and as I said then, she was right. They were happy to start their new lives together as husband and wife. Life could not get any better. That's what Laci believed. In June of 1998, Scott graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in agricultural business, and after they both had graduated, they agreed to open a sports bar, and they did. It was called The Shack. While business did start slow, it would eventually grow to relative success, and it just seemed like another piece of the puzzle in their lives was fitting into place. Despite the fact that business was improving, they didn't hold on to the shack for very long. They were ready to sell it as they wanted to start a family. In October of 2000, they purchased a 3-bedroom bungalow house and sold the shack 6 months later in April of 2001. Laci found a part-time job as a substitute teacher, and Scott found a job with Trade Corp USA. They were experts in micronutrients and specialty fertilizers. He made, I believe, 5,000 US dollars before taxes. So, quite a nice wage. Laci was living her best life. She was happy in her marriage, she had a great relationship with her parents, she really enjoyed her job. She was just she was just really happy. Her family would always say that being a housewife suited her perfectly. She always made sure that the house was in tip-top condition. She really enjoyed where she was in her life. And in 2002, at the age of 27, she was absolutely overjoyed to learn that she was pregnant. What she and Scott had been hoping for, had been planning for, was now about to come to fruition. They were about to become a family. In November of that same year, Laci was around 7 months pregnant, so they had already learnt the sex of the baby, which was a boy, and they were going to name their son Connor. Everything was great. Everything was perfect. Or was it? On the 23rd of November 2002, so Laci was 8 months pregnant and quickly approaching the end of her pregnancy, she and Scott, they went to Salon, which is the place where Laci's half-sister Amy worked. Now, Amy is a child that Laci's father Dennis had with his partner after Sharon and Dennis had divorced, and Laci and Amy were quite close. Amy cut Scott's hair as she did every month, and given that Scott planned to play golf the following day, he even offered to pick up a fruit basket that Amy had ordered for her grandfather as a Christmas present. Later that evening, Laci spoke on the phone to her mother Sharon. They too had a very close relationship, so they caught up on the events of the day and just engaged in general chit chat. The following morning, being Christmas Eve, presumably Laci was going to do some household chores and then take the family dog for a walk in a nearby park. Around the time of 10:30 a.m. that same morning, the Petersons' neighbour, Karen Service, said that she had found their dog, named Mackenzie, alone outside the home. A second neighbour, named Mike, said the same thing, and a third neighbour also saw Mackenzie with a muddy leash just wandering about in the neighbourhood. This third neighbour put the dog back into the Petersons' yard. They didn't find anything to be particularly out of place, but of course this is odd. Laci was meant to walk the family dog, and yet here's Mackenzie all alone with no Laci in sight. Scott had not been home for this duration. He had gone fishing in the morning, and so when he returned home, he found the house to be empty. He had gotten wet from fishing, so he went and got showered and washed his clothes to be presentable. Scott recalls that the last time he had seen Laci on that day was roughly 9:30 in the morning, so come 5 p.m. in the evening, he still hadn't seen Laci, nor had he heard from her. Naturally, this raises some questions and would cause some worry. You would think. Now, there are some conflicting reports on exactly what happened next. Some sources say that Scott reported Laci missing by calling the police, and others say that Laci's stepfather, Ron, had called them. Regardless, the police arrived quite quickly on the 24th of December 2002. They found that Laci's keys, her wallet, her sunglasses, they were all in a closet at home. So it then begs the question of, was she taken? Because if you're going to willingly leave your home, even if it's only for a 10-minute trip to the supermarket, you would take your keys and your wallet. These are crucial items. So, what happened to Laci? The dining table had even been meticulously set for a family dinner the following night, given that the following night was Christmas Day. One detective even found a phone book on the kitchen counter, and it had been opened to an ad for a defense lawyer. Why? Why would either of the Petersons need a defense lawyer? I do think it's important to note that Scott was reported to be quite calm when this was happening, when the police had come to their home. Now, I'm not one to judge how people respond to distressing situations. Just because he was calm isn't necessarily an indicator of guilt, but I think it does say something. What you think it says is up to you. Being Laci's spouse and arguably the closest person to her, the lead investigators questioned Scott. He initially said that he had spent the day golfing and that's why he wasn't aware as to where Laci was. Then he later changed his tune and said he had spent the day fishing in a marina roughly 90 miles away from where the couple lived. The investigators also noted his calm demeanour and thought it to be quite unusual. He wasn't asking questions. Where's Laci? What are you guys going to do? Can I have updates? He wasn't giving that kind of energy. He was quite relaxed about the situation. What happened next was an extensive search for Laci. Up to 900 people were involved in searching for her in the first 2 days. This search included police and firefighters. The police were on horseback and bicycles. There were canine units, almost anything and everything you could think of to find Laci. Because don't forget, she's heavily pregnant and no one had heard from her. Not her husband, not her mum, not her sister, her brother, any of her loved ones. And no one believed that Laci just upped and left. That was completely out of character for her. She wouldn't just up and leave. So you can only imagine the kind of thoughts that were going through everyone's minds. Over time, over 1,500 people volunteered to distribute information and to help search for her. And that's pretty amazing. A lot of these people didn't even know Laci, but they just had the compassion and thankfully had the time to dedicate to trying to find her. A monetary reward was even offered. Originally, it was for $25,000 and it increased to $500,000, but nothing came of it. There were no leads. Several months passed. The searches proved fruitless, and Laci's loved ones just didn't know what to do. The more time that passed reduced the chances of Laci being found alive. And on the 13th of April 2003, almost 4 months since Laci disappeared, their worst fears were confirmed. A couple had been walking their dog in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it was there that they discovered a decomposing but well-preserved body of a late-term male fetus. Now, I'm no doctor, but I do know that once a baby is born, the umbilical cord would be cut or clamped. That was not the case with this fetus. The umbilical cord was still attached and appeared to have been torn. It was also later revealed that there was a loop of nylon tape found around the fetus's neck, and there was a significant cut on the body. This was no accident. The very next day, the body of a recently pregnant woman was found, washed up on the eastern rocky shoreline of the same bay. This woman had been wearing beige pants and a maternity bra. This corpse had clearly been there for some time. It had decomposed to the point of almost being unrecognizable as a human being. The woman had been decapitated and her limbs were missing, particularly majority of her legs. DNA tests confirmed that these were the bodies of Laci and her unborn son, whose name was meant to be Connor. The exact date and cause of Laci's death could never be confirmed, and it never was. Laci had been missing for almost 4 months and had likely been deceased for majority, if not all of that time, and so when her body had been found, there wasn't enough of her left to make those determinations. However, certain things could be confirmed. Her cervix was intact, she had suffered 2 cracked ribs, although the forensic pathologist could not confirm if this had happened before or after her death. The only part of Laci's upper torso that had remained was her uterus, which had protected her fetus, and it was determined that Connor, the male fetus, had died in utero, Laci's son. It was also determined that Connor had been expelled from Laci's deceased body. Now, you'll recall earlier on in this video, I did mention how it's hypothesized that Scott carried on a few affairs before he and Laci married. I can confirm that Scott did have an affair that can be corroborated with a massage therapist named Amber Frey. They were introduced through or by a mutual friend. So let's rewind back to the end of December 2002. This was roughly, let's say, 6 days since Laci had disappeared. Amber had heard about Laci's disappearance from the news, and so, given her relationship with Scott, she informed the police of it. She also told them that 2 weeks prior to Laci's disappearance, Scott had told her that he was a widower and that this would be the first Christmas without his wife. What are you doing, Scott? What are you playing at, Scott? Why were you saying that this would be the first Christmas without your wife? How could you possibly know that that would be true? On the 18th of April 2003, the same day that DNA tests confirmed that the bodies found were Laci and Connor's, Scott was arrested. He claimed to be meeting up with his father and brother for a game of golf. This was interesting though, because what was found in his car didn't seem to be consistent with what you would need for a golfing trip. The police found $15,000 in cash, camping equipment, lots of different changes of clothes, 4 cell phones, 2 driver's licenses, and he had even dyed his naturally dark brown hair blonde. That is a little sus, or maybe a lot sus, if you ask me. One of the driving licenses that Scott had was his brother's, and Scott's father, Lee, did state that the reason why Scott had it is because the day before he had to get a San Diego resident discount at a golf course, and that Scott had been living out of his car due to the media attention the case had gotten. The police, however, saw these items as an indication that Scott wanted to flee. Now, the court of public opinion was not on Scott's side. People had pretty much already decided in their minds that he was guilty. And if I'm being frank, whenever someone goes missing or someone's killed, you always look at the spouse. If your spouse can love you so much, there's no reason to say they can't also hate you so much and then want to take action. Now, the hope is that the action would never be so extreme, but you really can't know. Laci didn't know. On the 21st of April 2003, Scott was arraigned at the Stanislaus County Superior Court. He was charged with 2 felony counts of murder with premeditation and special circumstances. Scott pled not guilty. The following year, on the 1st of June, his trial began. His trial actually had to be moved to San Mateo County because, as I mentioned before, many people had already decided that he was guilty in their minds, and so it really wouldn't have been a fair trial for him to be tried by his peers who were already convinced of his guilt. But moving county didn't really help Scott, because on the 12th of November 2004, he was convicted of first-degree murder for Laci's death and second-degree murder for Connor's. The judge sentenced Scott to death, calling the murder of Laci cruel, uncaring, heartless and callous. I'm with the judge on this one. I mean, think back to when Laci told her mother that Scott was the man she was going to marry. Laci was right. What Laci didn't know is that this man that she loved, this man that she trusted, would also be the man to kill her. On the 21st of October 2005, a Superior Court judge ruled that Scott was not entitled to collect on Laci's $250,000 life insurance policy, given that he had been convicted of her murder. The money went to Laci's mother, Sharon, as she was the executor of her estate. In 2006, Sharon wrote a book entitled For Laci, A Mother's Story of Love, Loss and Justice. This is all about Laci's life and Laci's death. I recommend you check it out. On the 8th of April 2018, Laci's beloved stepfather Ron Grantski, he died in his sleep. His health had been failing for quite some time. He was buried next to Laci and Connor. And on the 9th of December 2018, only 8 months later, Laci's father, Dennis Rocha, he died at the age of 72. On the 24th of August 2020, so extremely recent, there was a 7-0 decision from the Supreme Court of California where they upheld Scott's conviction, however they overturned the death sentence. The judge that had initially convicted Scott, Alfred DeLucci, he died back in February of 2008, but he didn't ask the jurors who opposed capital punishment if they could put their views aside and still be fair. Because of this, an impartial jury had not been guaranteed. On the 8th of December 2021, Scott was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the first-degree murder of Laci and a concurrent sentence of 15 years to life for the second-degree murder of his own unborn son, Connor. But he doesn't deserve to be even acknowledged as his father. Scott Lee Peterson killed his wife. He killed his unborn son. He killed any chance he had of a future that wasn't behind bars. Now, there is an ongoing assumption that the reason why Scott did this is that he wasn't ready to be a parent, which is fine, that's not for everyone. There are lots of ways that he could have walked away without doing this. There's also the assumption that he didn't want to be with Laci anymore. He cheated on her endlessly, from what it seems. That is also fine if he didn't want to be with her. There are lots of other things he could have done that weren't this. Laci Denise Peterson was only 27 years old. She had so much more life to live. And Connor, he didn't even get a chance. This is quite a high-profile case. It has received no shortage of media attention. And it's always been one that's weighed heavily on my mind. It's odd because I don't necessarily relate. I'm not a wife, I'm not a mother. But I am a fellow human being, and this is a fate that I wish on no one. Thank you to everyone that has made it to this point in the video. Really appreciate you taking the time to stay strapped in. Please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you soon.